next guest needs very little introduction, I'm sure, in this room. Mr. Bob Zubrin will be speaking on his keynote for Mars. He's the author of The Case for Mars, the founder of the Mars Society. He's the Red Team leader who's been influenced, who has influenced all of our plans for Mars, including Mr. Musk. And he's also the leading space activist and inventor. It is to Mars where we must go. And anything else makes him and the rest of us see red. So, without any further ado, Mr. Bob Zubrin.
Is Rick Tumlinson here? Because he'd probably enjoy this conference. Anyway, I'm going to focus here, when the Mars Society talks about Mars, we say, why Mars? For the science, for the challenge, for the future. And that's all true. But I've only got a half hour. I'm going to talk about the most important thing about Mars, which is freedom. The case for Mars is freedom. Okay? And so I want to talk about the relationship between Mars, freedom, and, the future. Okay, a future worth having, a grand future. But in order to talk about the future, I want to take you a little bit into the past, okay, to a very interesting speech, one of the great speeches in American history. Okay, so the year is 1876. The place is Indianapolis. The occasion is a gathering of Civil War veterans in a rally for Republican candidate Rutherford Hayes. Okay. The speaker is Colonel Robert Ingersoll. Who here knows who Ingersoll was? Only a few. Okay, but Ingersoll was once extremely famous. He was one of the greatest orators in American history. And he was the speaker. He was a Lincoln Republican, and he was a member of an intellectual current in late 19th century America known as the Free Thought Movement, whose advocates also included Thomas Edison and Mark Twain. Okay? And very controversial in his time. And he spoke a lot about a lot of things, and this, in my opinion, is his greatest speech. It contains this magnificent piece of rhetoric, which you find in collections of great rhetoric known as the Vision of War. But I'm not going to talk about the Vision of War. I'm going to talk about another part of the speech. Because what he's doing is he's talking to these Civil War veterans, okay? And he's saying, what was that all about? Okay, what was it all about? And he says, it was about ending slavery. Okay, it was about ending slavery. And he goes through the horrors of slavery, which these people had witnessed firsthand. These were the Army of Liberation. Okay, these were like the men who liberated Dachau. These had gone down and seen the abominations of slavery firsthand and been shocked by them. He says, but why is it that we don't need slavery? Okay, Confederates said we need slavery. We need slaves to do all the work. And he says, we don't need slavery because we have enslaved the forces of nature. Okay, and he says, I'll read you what he says. He says, we believe that free labor, that free thought has enslaved the forces of nature and made them work for man. We make the old attraction of gravitation work for us. We make the lightning do our errands. We make steam hammer and fashion what we need. The forces of nature are the slaves of the Republican Party. They have no backs to be whipped. They have no hearts to be torn, no hearts to be broken. They cannot be separated from their wives. They cannot be dragged from the bosoms of their husbands. They work night and day and never tire. You cannot whip them. You cannot starve them. And even a Democrat can be trusted with one of them. Okay. I tell you I'm a Republican. I believe, as I told you, that free labor will give us these slaves. Free labor will produce all these things. And everything you have today has been produced by free labor, nothing by slave labor. Slavery never invented but one machine, and that was a threshing machine in the shape of a whip. Free labor has invented all the machines. This, by the way, is 1876, at which time, simultaneous with the speech, the first American World's Fair was going on in Philadelphia, in which all kinds of magnificent machines, the wonders of the age, were being shown to the public to worldwide acclaim. Okay, so the machines give us freedom. Freedom gives us the machines. See? That's the essence of the idea. Okay, so now let's go forward in time a little bit. Okay, space age. John F. Kennedy. A new ocean has opened and free men must sail it. Okay, challenged the Soviets to the race to the moon. And we beat them by taking advantage of the capacities, the creative potential of freedom. They were ahead, we caught up, we passed them way behind. Okay. Now, and that was, we astonished the world with what free people could do. We really did. That's what the program was designed to do, and that is what it did. And I can tell you that for a fact because the day we landed on the moon, I was in Leningrad playing chess, and man, the Soviets were floored. And the regular people, the chess players are just normal people, sort of. But, you know, they're not in the Politburo or anything. You know, it's like, do you know the cosmonauts? I mean, and they thought it was great. They understood, okay? But, however, that victory, though it took advantage of some of the potentials of a free society, was not fully representative of it, okay? And ultimately, it failed to carry through and create a true space age, okay? Because there was a failure in political leadership. Now, we didn't have to have a failure in political leadership right then. I think it's actually a scandal that the Nixon administration stopped Apollo in dead stride and stopped us from going on to Mars, which we could have done by the 1980s had we continued as we had planned. But there was a fundamental weakness there, which depended upon the virtue of the political class. I think it failed a little earlier than it needed to, okay? That is, Apollo succeeded because it was executed by a political class that had been forged in the heat of World War II and knew how to carry out great projects, which included winning World War II and Atoms for Peace and the interstate highway system and, Apollo and all these things. And this faded. But if it hadn't have failed with the Nixon administration, it probably would have failed in the next administration or the one after that. You couldn't count on rolling 7 5 times in a row, okay? It had a single point failure, which was the merit of the political leadership, and when that fell short, the thing fell apart, okay? But now, precisely because the political class has dropped the ball and, in many ways, a new kind of leadership has stepped forward, and this is the entrepreneurial space leadership. And this is, once again, a product of the free society. Only a free society can produce these people, okay? So this is, in addition to our technological virtuosity, we have another kind of virtuosity here, okay? An additional source of creativity. Wow, 10 minutes? I thought I just began. Okay, and they've created this new space thing, okay, and it has cut the cost of space launch by a factor of 5 in the past 10 years after it remained stagnant for the previous 50 or 40 since 1970 to 2010. And with the cost of space launch coming down, the spacecraft designers can become much less conservative. And so we're going to get a much better spacecraft because, so with better spacecraft, cheaper space launch, more business plans become cost effective. And so we get a lot more space businesses. But furthermore, if you have reusable space launch vehicles. Pretty soon you're going to have used space launch vehicles available on the market. Okay? I mean, look, not everybody can afford a new car with prices these days, but almost everyone can afford a used car. Okay? And that's why everybody's got a car. Well, days could have come when everybody's going to have a space launch vehicle, or not quite, but the point is there. I mean, Musk told me he thought he could build Starships, that is the upper stage of his combination, for $10 million. Probably sell them for $20 million. But it probably means you can get someday you'll be able to get a used one from Astrolinea Mexicana for $3 million. And so if you want to emigrate to Mars, okay, you got 100 people in a Starship, divide $3 million by 100 people, it's $30,000 each. It's the kind of money somebody could find if they really wanted to make a change, okay? And this is not just the future. This is changing world realities right now. I mean, you take this war in Ukraine. This is a space war. It's what it is. The Ukrainians are fighting level against the Russians because of space weapons, which include space-based communications. And in particular, the space-based communication system they are using is directly a product of the new space revolution, nothing else. Starlink. Space-based reconnaissance and space-based targeting of GPS-guided munitions. And that is how, despite the fact that they're outgunned 10 to 1, their strikes are 10 times more accurate, and they're doing amazingly well, and they could win because of this. Because that's the other thing, okay? Freedom gives us the machines, which means freedom has a stick, okay? And if Russia ever really wants to compete with us in space, they're going to have to be free. They're going to have to change, okay? It's an imperative, okay? And they can either do that or lose, okay? It's their choice. But that's it. Because, I mean, look, there are people in Russia today who have billions and billions of dollars and who believe in the idea of human expansion into space. And there's plenty of technical talent. But there's no SpaceX because there can't be in a regime where there is no law, where there's a kleptocracy, which anybody created a SpaceX, the thieves in the Kremlin would just steal it from them. Okay? So freedom will give us space. But will space give us freedom? That is the other side of the coin. I believe yes. Okay. First of all, only freedom can give you space. Okay. There are some people who say an extraterrestrial colony will be a tyranny because if the government doesn't like you, they can turn your air off. This is nonsense. Okay. An extraterrestrial city-state, and I believe there will be many city-states on Mars, and they will compete for immigrants. And why would anyone emigrate to a tyranny? They would not. This is why the 13 original states of the United States outcompeted Haiti and Central America for immigrants. It's why, at the time of the revolution, the Caribbean colonies actually had a bigger economy, certainly made much more money than the 13 colonies. It's why the British fleet left Cornwallis to be captured in Lordstown while they were busy taking over French colonies in the Caribbean. There's more money involved. But we grew into an economic and political superpower because we need true immigrants, because people wanted to come to a free country, okay? And they did. So the idea of an extraterrestrial tyranny is, from the point of view of natural selection, an impossibility because it defies the generative principle necessary for its growth. It also defies the generative principle necessary for its prosperity, okay? Which is that it will have to be a center of invention. A Mars colony will be a frontier society confronted with many new challenges, and only a highly inventive population will be able to take them on. So a Mars colony will not survive without inventiveness, which means freedom, and it will not prosper without it, because the main export of the Mars colony will be inventions, will be IP, precisely what it needs to succeed. Okay? Just as the American frontier created a tremendous labor shortage, which made us virtuosities in creating labor-saving machinery. That will also exist in spades on Mars. So yeah, they'll be experts at labor-saving machinery, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, all of which are ways to multiply the capacity of labor. And if you multiply the capacity of labor, guess what? You increase the standard of living. Because the standard of living is product available per person, which equals, on average, the product produced per person. Okay? So labor-saving machinery means high pay. Okay, that's what it means. And There you go. Now, also other fields, biotech. They're going to want ultra-productive crops because it's going to be limited in acreage to greenhouses. So they're going to want to use biotech to the optimum, and that, once again, is going to be patentable exports to Earth. Then energy, okay, another example. You know, what energy are people going to use on Mars? There's no fossil fuels on Mars. You can make them, synthesize them from Martian water and CO2, but that takes energy to do. Fossil fuels on Mars is a method of energy storage. It's not an energy resource. There's no hydroelectric power on Mars, won't be till we terraform it. Wind is too thin. Solar power is only 40% as strong as Earth and frequently interrupted by dust storms. By the way, you're not correct on the time. Okay, I have a half hour for the talk, and I started at 10:10 or 9:10, 10 whatever. Nuclear fission is possible to use on Mars, but to make the fuel for nuclear fission requires a large industrial base to mine, concentrate the uranium, then do isotope separation, fabricate fuel pellets. It's complicated. It needs a large division of labor to support. So you can certainly use nuclear fission reactors on Mars, and initial expeditions will certainly do so. But it's not really the source of energy for Mars. The best source of energy for Mars is fusion power, okay? Because deuterium is 6 times as common on Mars as it is on Earth. And refining it out of hydrogen is extremely simple. And there's going to be an enormous amount of hydrogen available as hydrogen on Mars because all Martian life support systems involve water electrolysis as a step. So it's the natural source of energy for Mars, and therefore they will develop it. And once again, there's a historical parallel here. Okay, you know, the British developed the steam engine, which they used for pumping water out of coal mines, facilitating the first step in the industrial evolution. But the steamboat was invented in very early America. We're talking about 1790s America, first major technological contribution of America to the world, and beginning a string of innovations that went forward to the telegraph and recorded sound and centrally generated electric power and electric light bulbs and airplanes and nuclear power and the internet. Okay, lots of stuff. But this was our first mega hit, the steamboat. Why was the steamboat invented in America? Because early America didn't really have highways. The best methods of transportation were rivers. And sailboats really can't cut it very well on rivers. So we thought we had to take this steam thing and apply it to boat propulsion. And in the process, we created high-pressure steam engines, which were much more efficient and compact and powerful than the low-pressure steam engines the British would use from pumping out mines. And then that advanced to the next step, enabled railroads, okay, railroad locomotives, and other things, and of course, later industrial dynamos and so forth. But that was our first big hit, and once again, that came from America. Now also, once again, steam engines weren't forced to become efficient until they were used for transportation, okay? Martians are going to develop fusion power if it's not already developed on Earth by then, but furthermore, they're going to have an incentive to use it for transportation because a fusion-powered rocket can get an exhaust velocity up to 7% the speed of light, okay? And you're talking about advancing interplanetary propulsion radically. You're talking about opening the path to the stars. That's what you're talking about, okay, with fusion. So the necessity of Mars, the fact that you're going to have a highly technically adept population in a frontier environment where they are forced to innovate and where they will be free to innovate because the Martian colonies will be, I believe, essentially independent city-states. And there's going to be a lot of them, okay? And now people ask me, okay, but what kind of government are these city-states going to have? And you know, the Mars Society had a couple of contests over the past several years, people designing Mars colonies, and it included the design of their social system. And people had all sorts of ideas, and ranged from libertarian to social democratic and other things that don't really even fit into that spectrum. And, well, which is the right one? Well, you know, experience is going to tell, okay? The one that works is the right one. The one that attracts immigrants the most, the one that facilitates invention and therefore prosperity the most. Those are the ones that will grow. Those are the ones that will prevail. Other things, some might survive and be minor examples of suboptimal ideas, and others will simply fail. Okay, but the ones that survive will become examples, and not just to other Martian colonies, but to Earth and to people everywhere else. Okay, because social innovations, just like technical innovations, if they're proven to work somewhere, they become available everywhere. This is how humanity progresses. Okay, and I'm going to come back to this point in a minute. Okay, and if we do this, therefore, okay, if we establish that first human foothold on Mars, okay, it will be a source of noble experiments that will greatly benefit freedom on Earth. And if we do this, then 300 years from now, there will be new branches of human civilization, and not just in the form of multiple city-states all over Mars, okay, but on numerous planets orbiting stars in this region of the galaxy. Hundreds of new nations with new languages, new literatures, new cultures, new social innovations, incredible additions to science and technology, new heroes, new tales of great deeds that will be used to inspire people to go further. And this is something grand and wonderful. And if you have it in your power to do something grand and wonderful, to create something grand and wonderful, then you should. But how does this then affect the world of the present? Okay. The ultimate future affects the near future because it affects people's ideas on what the future is, and ideas have consequences. Now, to get right to the point, what is the major threat to the human race today? Now, if I asked this question at a conference 3 years ago, the fashionable answer that most people would come up with would have been climate change, global warming. Okay. Now, I actually believe that climate change is real. I believe it poses serious concerns that need to be addressed. But it is not the threat that could possibly kill you next week, okay, or next year, or in 30 years. Okay, no. The world warmed at 1 degree C in the past 150 years. It might warm another degree C in the next 70 years. There are issues that will cause, but it is not an existential threat to civilization. The existential threat to human civilization is bad ideas, because ideas have consequences. And the main threat to human race in this century is the same thing that caused the global catastrophes of the 20th century, which is bad ideas, and in particular, one bad idea which came in a variety of forms. And what that bad idea was and is that there isn't enough for everybody. Okay? That is the idea that ultimately caused World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, the Holodomor, the Cambodian genocide, you name it, okay? Now, now it's nonsense, but bad ideas, untrue ideas, can still have very real effects. 1912, Ferdinand von Bernhardi, chief intellectual of German general staff, wrote a book, Germany in the Next War. Says, look, here's Eurasia. Who's going to get it? Either us Germans or the Russians. Okay, we're going to have to fight them for it sooner or later. Should it be sooner or later? Well, clearly sooner, because we can take them down now before they industrialize. So 2 years later, they used the pretext of the assassination of the Archduke to launch World War I. And Europe, which was the most prosperous it had ever been in human history, the most prosperous anyone had ever been in human history, destroys itself over a myth. Okay? Generation later, Hitler, even more hysterically, proclaims the laws of existence require uninterrupted killing so that the better may live. Germany needs living space. This was all pure nonsense. Germany never needed living space. Germany today is significantly smaller than the Third Reich. It has a larger population and yet a vastly higher standard of living. Why? Not because they were successful invading other countries, killing everybody and stealing their cows. Okay, they were actually unsuccessful in that, and if they had succeeded in that, they would be poorer. Because actually the reason why Germans today are much richer than they were in the Third Reich is because of the advance of global science and technology, which has been a project of the human race as a whole, to which Germans certainly have contributed, but which so have many other peoples, including very notably people they were trying very hard to exterminate. And had they been successful, they'd be much poorer, okay? Because human social evolution does not occur by superior races exterminating inferior races. It is not the same as biological evolution. It's quite different because, you see, humans, unlike biology, can inherit acquired traits. And not only can we inherit acquired traits, such as inventions, from our parents, we can inherit them from people to whom we are not related at all. So that inventions made anywhere ultimately become used everywhere. And inventions is what defines resources. There's no such thing as a natural resource. It is a myth. It's nonsense. There's only natural raw materials. It is human creativity which turns materials into resources. So, for instance, land was not a resource till we invented agriculture. Became more of a resource as agriculture became more effective. Iron was not a resource for 3,000 years after humans began using metals, copper, okay, because the kilns were not hot enough to smelt iron out of iron ore, so they were using copper and tin, which together are 100 parts per million in the Earth's crust, instead of iron, which is 100,000 parts per million in the Earth's crust. The advance of technology multiplied metals available to humanity 1,000-fold, and then doubled it again when aluminum becomes available in the late 19th century. Okay? Oil was not a resource until we invented oil drilling and refining and machines that could run on the product. Uranium obviously was not a resource till we invented nuclear power. Okay? Deuterium is not a resource now, but it will be once we develop fusion power. So the point is that this idea that people are competing for resources is nonsense. People create resources. But this myth, which caused the destructions of the 20th century, can cause it again now, because I can tell you for a fact, because I have spoken to them, that there are people, prominent people in America's national security establishment who believe that war with China is inevitable. Because, look, there's 1.4 billion of them. If they all start driving cars like us, there won't be enough oil in the world. Okay? And you could bet your bottom dollar that they have counterparts in Beijing who look at this from the opposite side of the chessboard and think pretty much the same kinds of things. And once again, if we're going to have to fight it with them sooner or later, the only question is sooner or later, and it will always be to the advantage of one side or the other to make it sooner. Okay? That's how it is. So, but this, again, is nonsense. Now, it's not true that there are insufficient materials on the Earth for us to create infinite resources. We can, okay? Because human creativity is infinite. But people can't see that. It's like trying to explain to a mathematically illiterate person that there's an infinite number of points in a line segment. They can't believe it. A line segment's 1 inch long. How can it possibly have an infinite number of points in it? It takes a certain amount of sophistication to see that. But anybody can see that a line that goes off in both directions infinitely can have an infinite number of points. That's easy to see. And that's why we got to go to Mars. Okay? We're not going to get oil from Mars. Okay? We will get inventions from Mars that will improve our standard of living and all that kind of thing. Okay? That's good stuff. But the main thing we're going to get from Mars is the truth. The truth that it is ridiculous to kill each other fighting over provinces when by working together we can open up planets. Okay? So there it is. Okay? We are not in a struggle for survival over infinite resources. We are in a joint enterprise to create new opportunities for humanity. Okay? Freedom will give us space. Space will give us freedom. That's the case for Mars.